All right. Did you have a discussion topic as well?
Yeah, and this one kind of it has two questions in it. But essentially it revolves around when you first play a game, or essentially um during the initial playthrough of a game. And it's, when do you think you're in a good place to judge the game, as far as whether you think it's a good game or something you like or not? And then how long do you think you should have to play a game before it gets good? Because I know that sometimes there might be a game and you're playing it, you might not be enjoying it, but then someone says, "Oh, keep going, it gets good at this point." But do you think that there should be a point that you should have to play, or do you think that a game should pretty much near the beginning already be good enough?
It's a good question. I know this is kind of a cop out, but I really do think it varies from game to game. Now, if it's a 10-hour game and you have to get halfway through the game for it to get good, like if it's just bad before that, I don't think I think that you can judge pretty early whether or not you like it. But one example of a game where I almost abandoned it was Persona 4 Golden, because because you have to go through basically 2 hours to get to like the real, well, I guess it's maybe not quite that long, but like the introductory stuff, it takes at least, it takes like an hour to hour and a half before you finally get to a point where you're really getting to actually like get into the combat and everything else. And it was really hard to get through the first time. And I still find it way too long for that opening section. Like, I think it's important as far as what it sets up, but that's a game where, yes, it's like 100-hour game. So from that standpoint, it's not very much time, but it was really hard to get into. Whereas you compare it with Persona 5 Royal, or, Persona 5 in general, and you're in the action within 5 minutes. Or, another example that I think is one that actually was worse for me, although I haven't I haven't gotten super far in the game yet, is the first Ni no Kuni, because the opening hour of that game is slow. I mean, you technically do more than you do in Persona 4 Golden, but it's still just like, I'm not having a good time here. I'm just feeling like this is dragging on way too long to get to like the main part of the game, because you don't even get to do a single fight until like an hour into the game. And I mean, even Persona 4 Golden, you at least got like one or two small fights before then. It was just that you weren't getting into like the main action of the game. You're like getting into the main stuff to where you were doing the kind of stuff you would be doing the rest of the game. But then there's other times where, like, I don't know, it's so hard to say from game to game. I think also some of it is, I mean, so much of it really just depends on the game. And I think it's kind of you have to judge whether or not it's something that is going to, I mean, like if you play for an hour in a game and you're just hating it, then you probably should step away. I mean, it may be a situation where you just need to put it down because you're just not into it at that moment, and that if you come back later, you may end up absolutely loving it. And I've had that happen with games like Infamous. But then there's other situations where you play for an hour, you find that it's just like, I guess I should say, I think there's a difference between if it's a game that's just not grabbing you versus a game that you're just really disliking. And I think that really, if you play for 2-3 hours and you find that the game is either not grabbing you at all, or especially if it's a game that you're just really not liking, then you probably should just not play it. And there can be situations where maybe you just need to step away and come back to it later. And that's really kind of an individual decision. But I've had several games where I had to step away from the game because I just was not getting into it, or I just wasn't liking it. And then I eventually came back and it's like, oh, I love this game. So I think really you just have to ask yourself, do I want to give this game another try later on? Or do I just want to be completely done with it? Is the reason I'm not getting into this game because it's just not grabbing me and I'm just not in the right mindset for it? Or is it because it's just a bad game? And I think Trek to Yomi is just a bad game. But and that one I played for like 6 hours. I'm like 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through the game, and I don't like it. So anyway. But yeah, that's essentially my answer to the question. My long answer.
That distinction you made about whether you dislike a game or it's just not grabbing you, that's something I never thought about. I think that's a great distinction. And honestly, if I had to think back, I would probably say most of the time where I wasn't really feeling a game probably was more so the fact that it just wasn't grabbing me rather than I outright despised it. Because I mean, thinking back about it, I would say the first part of Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time is just it just drags on until you finally leave Kakariko Village. Not Kakariko Village.
Kokiri Forest.
No, that is, yeah, the Kokiri Forest. I feel like after you leave that area is when the game actually starts to get good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really just the game. As far as I'm concerned, it's just the game doesn't grab you until after you leave that point. And also similar to Twilight Princess, like the first intro part of the game is just so dull to me. But after you get out of that area, then the game starts being fun. But, you know, I compare that with, say, Breath of the Wild, where I think that right off the bat, even when you're doing just the sort of tutorial areas on the plateau, it's still fun. And, you know, and then once you actually leave the plateau, you're thinking, oh my goodness, there's more. Like, there's so much out here to do. And that, what I just did was just a small part of the overarching world. So I thought I think that's probably one of the best ways in the series. But then, I mean, compared to just say the original NES Zelda, where right off the bat you're in the adventure. Like, there's no story going on. Take your sword. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Go out there. Have some fun. So I guess it really just depends. But then also, I definitely agree with you saying that a game not grabbing you and coming back later and you might enjoy it really is true, because Stardew Valley, I played that game, I probably spent 17 hours or so playing that game. I didn't get it at all, and I was not really enjoying it. But then once I played it with friends and I actually understood the mechanics of the game and how everything functions, once it clicked in my head, I started to enjoy it more, and it became one of my favorite games. And in a similar sense, No Man's Sky, I played that. I really didn't get it much. I played it, I really wasn't understanding it, but then once I played it some more with friends as well, I started understanding how the game worked, and then I started to enjoy it more. So I definitely agree with you that a lot of the times it could be something where the game just hasn't grabbed our attention yet, it's not interesting us yet, and it might not be a case where we hate it. I mean, maybe sometimes, like you said, with Trek to Yomi, it might be a case where we might hate a game, but it probably could be more often than not the game's just not catching our attention. But similar to what you said, though, if you're playing a game that's 10 hours long and you're 5 hours in and you're still not enjoying it, you probably are most likely in a good position to judge whether it's actually good or not, or at least whether you're enjoying it.
Yep.